Oh, that's right.
Okay, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, it's good.
We're running?
Yeah, it just turned on.
Again, today I'm just trying to lay some foundational stuff, so we're not getting to as many specifics. And the future seminars will be very specific about a lot of things, trying very specific examples for age groups. And at that point, it'd be very good. Ask questions about, well, what about a child of this age, and how does this principle apply? If you want to do that now, that's fine. I'll try and come up with something, but I'm also trying to be a little sense of the time. We're going to end up going long because we got started so late. So I just want to be mindful that you probably have things that you're going to try and get done this afternoon. So we've reviewed God designed for marriage, the role of the husband, the role of the wife, and now the idea of what a child is as well. Again, you can't be a better parent than you are a spouse. Again, the very simple reason, Luke 6:40 says a pupil is not above his teacher, but when he's fully trained, he will be like his teacher. A child, when he is fully trained, is going to be like his parents. Might even sound like his parents. Which could be good or bad depending on how they sound. Because you're the primary teacher of your children. Again, there may be many other people involved in training your children, but you are the primary one. Or at least you should be. And again, I deal in a godly marriage, even if your spouse is not a Christian, it makes it more difficult, or divorce and antagonistic to you, that's more difficult, but still you are the one who's going to instill values into them. And what you are like, your character, is going to rub off on them. If you are going to respond well in submission to the Lord by following what His commands are in all the various situations of this part of life, you are teaching your child to do the same. So all the moral characteristics, we'll mention some of those in the next session. If they see it in you, it starts being put into them. If you're kind, they're going to want to be following that example. If you speak gently, they'll do the same thing. If you're Italian and it's a loud household, guess what the children become?
Yeah.
They're loud. So they just follow suit, right?
Just to kind of reinforce what you said, I lotion my face up every evening after I wash my face. And my daughter comes in and she goes, "Mommy, cream?" Like, I need cream for my face
right.
too. It's evening.
Like
Yeah. It's so funny.
Also went over the basics of the role of children, learn, obey their parents. Again, obedience really should be the first time with the right attitude. If you're not requiring that, you're making it harder on them and you. I find children are gamblers. If they can get away with it, or maybe they won't require it, maybe, and so they won't. So I'll just reinforce that. They need to obey you. You need to teach them to do that. Don't teach them to sin. Require them to obey the first time. It's really not hard. And it solves everybody a whole lot of headaches from the practical standpoint.
Well, I got a question.
Sure.
Because this is what I noticed what Monique does. She definitely takes advantage of the moment. So
yeah.
if you're, I guess I got a two-part question. Nowadays in the stores, you can't discipline really outwardly in a way. Like the other day, we're at Target. She doesn't want to stand up. She wants to crawl on the ground. Okay. So what I did, and I'm surprised it worked this time, but normally it wouldn't. She was doing that. So I picked her up. She was screaming or whatever. I walked away like towards the front door. I looked her right in the face and said, "You need to listen to Daddy, and you're gonna stand up." It worked, but sometimes that doesn't work. So now the fight is that if you raise any hand or you do anything that some parent deems to call you. So I guess, and also my other part of the question is, I'll be on the phone, even talking to you, you probably hear in the background, and she, which is not normal behavior, she doesn't always do that, but she knows the opportunity is here now that she can do this. And what do you do then? Like,
all right, let me handle both those questions. We'll deal out in detail when we get to the seminars dealing with discipline. But in brief, yes, it's much harder in our society. When I was growing up, there was no question. You were dealt with right then. And you were ashamed if your child was acting up, period. Now it's kind of the opposite. You leave the store, and you deal with them at home. I'll give some stories about that in the other session, but that basically becomes it. If you have to leave, you leave. Is it a pain? Definitely. Our problem is we're a little on the lazy side too. It's like, if I do this, and then I gotta come back, and I don't really have time. Okay, but what's your real purpose in life?
Right.
That's why we have to think through that these are our responsibilities. Is my purpose has to be is training them is more important than whatever it was I was gonna get done.
May I say something also?
Yeah.
Sometimes as parents, we're inconsistent and we don't react the same way to the same behavior each and every time, and they know that.
Oh, yeah.
They're so bright and they pick up on
Consistency
everything.
is crucial. And again, we're gonna get that to discipline. But in everything you're training them, consistency is,
Key.
it is key. Because again, if you're not consistent, they will gamble and you won't do it. So it's consistent. You take them out,
Yeah.
okay? They're on the phone disrupting. It doesn't take much with, you know, you can say, excuse me, and give them a direct command. And if they still don't say is, we will deal with this when I get off the phone. Go to your room. That's actually scarier for them because now they have to spend it.
Yeah, they gotta wait, anticipate.
Okay? So it is. But behind that is going to be this thing. Why are we inconsistent? Because we're almost like begging, please obey, because I
Yes.
don't want to have to deal with this. Well, you have to deal with it. Are your parent, is your role as a parent important enough to you that you value your child's character training, to actually train them? Now the blessing is, though it's hard in the beginning, it definitely gets easier because they become more compliant. You're reaching their own heart. The young ages, yeah, there were times that we were like, can Jimmy just get through one day, just one day, without being chastised 10 times? Just, you know, maybe only 5 times, you know, without it all. You know, that he was tough, but we had to be consistent. And that made the difference. We had to be persevering in it, but then the scripture says we are to be diligent to teach our children. Well, this now goes into the role of parents, and that's when we're talking about this session. Our children are to obey. Their role is to obey. Their responsibility is to learn. When they get older, they're in school, and they don't like school, you just say, that's your responsibility. Right now, your job is to learn. Learn everything you can. What about the parents then? Now, I prefer to be optimistic and positive, but the 2 main commands we have in the New Testament are from the negative standpoint when it comes to our role as parents. It's in Colossians 3:21 and Ephesians 6:4. Colossians 3:21 states, fathers, do not exasperate your children that they may not lose heart. Now, this passage is dependent upon the parent actually carrying out everything else in Colossians 3. And that passage is dealing with the actions of putting off the old man, putting on the new man. And he goes through a lot of character traits. It's the actions and attitudes that you should have in being someone saved as opposed to what you were before you were saved. So you're putting on what is consistent with being redeemed, a regenerated person, someone who's raised up with Christ. So you're going to reject the things that used to be there: immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, greed, anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive speech. And we're going to be putting into ourselves compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, bearing one another's burdens, forgiving each other, being loving, and having the word of Christ richly dwell in you. That's the context of the passage. So when it's giving this prohibition, that's what's behind it. Don't be like you were. Don't cause your children to go that direction. We're going to go a different direction. So don't exasperate them. Don't cause them to lose heart. The things you used to do as a non-Christian, those kind of attitudes and actions, that will definitely cause that. It's going to cause them to lose heart. It's going to exasperate them. The godly parent then corrects, put on this new man. These are the characteristics that's going to bring about a blessing to your children. Because you're going to be blessed too as you do it. Now, in a similar way, Paul says in Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. That, again, is based on this assumption of the parent following all the other commands in chapter 5, walking in wisdom with God, of being filled with the Spirit, of being in mutual submission, fulfilling your role as a husband or a wife. Hence, we get to this You've required them to obey, so don't provoke them to anger. But why these specific prohibitions? Well, the answer lies in the abuse that can easily arise because of your position as a parent. You are in the superior position. They're in the inferior one. And because of that, the parent must be very careful of becoming authoritarian and arbitrary in their commands. You have to give proper thought to what you're teaching your child and the difficulties that your commands may place upon them. Can they actually accomplish it? What actually are you requiring them, and why are you requiring that? Because if we're authoritarian and arbitrary, it's simply to please us. You know, treat them like a dog. Go fetch my slippers. Wait a minute. Now maybe you can ask them nicely, but if you're commanding them to go fetch your slippers, what are you really thinking about them? I hope you get my point here. I have a human being here I'm training to godliness, but they're currently in a position they must obey me. I don't want to abuse that. The idea of exasperation, the word here, tidzo, means to stir up, to stimulate, to provoke, and it's a response to something that's happening. And usually we think of that kind of idea of something good. You know, we stir up good things, but you can also stir up bad things. And that's what they're talking about. Don't be stirring up, provoking this child so that they become disheartened. The word here for that, athumeo, it's a negation of the spirit. It's to remove courage. Interesting juxtaposition here in these words. We usually think of something that stimulates, provokes providence action. This is actually doing the opposite. I'm provoking inaction. I'm provoking them to give up. I'm stirring them up to forget it. That's what's going on here, so it's an interesting wordplay here. Well, how can a child be provoked to give up? Because when something is prodded too long, it builds up callus, and then it no longer responds. If you get a sliver under your skin, and we've all had that at some point, you can't get it out, it just remains in there. And for a long time, it's just like, it's painful. And then it's like, well, it doesn't hurt anymore. You're like, well, is it still there? And you see there's just like this knobby thing there, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It's callous all around it. You no longer feel it. And that's what is being described here. They've been prodded and provoked so long, they're callous to it. They're no longer feeling it. The negative stimulation of that type is first going to cause anger, as Ephesians 6:4 warns us about, but eventually it continues on. It discourages, it disheartens, creating either an indifference, maybe even despondency. Some children walk around just sad. Why are they sad? They've given up. They don't see any hope. There are many things a parent can do to provoke their children to an angry response, which, when continued, can eventually lead to this kind of discouragement and giving up. And I want to point out a few of those, the more common things that might do that. We might slip into doing it. But I first want to make a caveat here of, do not parent out of fear your child may be angry. Okay? We're not to provoke them to anger. But what are we talking about there? Generally, a child is going to be angry for what reason? They don't get what they want. And so they're angry. We're not talking about that. We're going to continue on to parent properly, and yes, remove it. They may be angry, but that's not what this is talking about. We need to be thinking through, why are they angry? If they're angry for a simple reason, then we continue the correction. We continue to do what we need to do. But what if they're angry because it's something you're doing that you shouldn't be doing? Well, that we need to change. So we need to think through, and when the child's getting angry, we should start wondering why. What's bothering them so much? That may help us figure out what we need to do in terms of correction if they're angry for the wrong reason, and we can correct their thinking. But it may also help correct us in what we're doing and provoking them to a response that really shouldn't be there. Let me give you a few things here that are more common to cause that kind of anger, and then when continued causes an exasperation and a giving up. The first is abuse, whether it's physical or verbal. Generally those who abuse are people who don't have self-control themselves, and so they take it out in anger. Anger breeds anger. Proverbs has a lot of different verses on this. Proverbs 30, verse 33. The churning of milk produces bug, the pressing of the nose brings forth blood. So the churning of anger produces strife. So it just keeps getting worse. Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. There's one for us. Sometimes have we responded harshly to our child when a gentle answer could have kept that from happening. Now this is also true for kids. Kind of anger is never godly. It cannot produce godly results. In fact, James 1:20 tells us the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. That's a verse that sticks in my mind in correcting my own response that sometimes would be into angers. You know, it's like, okay, what am I really after here? I want a godly response. If I respond this way, I'm not going to achieve what I'm really after. So I need to think through what I'm doing, including, well, why am I really angry? Let's deal with the real issue, not just an emotional response to it. Now that lays one thing down, lays as a blanket statement. Parents should never take out their anger on their children, period. Even if you've suffered at the hands of somebody else, you need to remember revenge belongs to the Lord, and you overcome evil with good. That's Romans 12:19-21. It's even worse if someone else has caused you to anger and you take it out on a third person, especially your child. It's simply wrong. It's sinful. A simple definition for child abuse is striking out a child, whether verbally or physically, out of anger. Never appropriate for a parent, even more so for a Christian parent, to do that. If you're angry and you need to chasten your child, do a correction, you need to stop, calm down, and then proceed. That may mean the child may have to wait. We've had to do that with, I'm upset, and I know I'm upset, so it's, you wait here, I will come back when I can deal with you. Okay? Don't respond with anger. That is never going to produce what you really would like to, which is righteousness in your children. The anger in you will be picked up by your child, and it will respond likewise. I'm kind of wondering which culture does not have the excuse of, well, we're just whatever, and we act that way. I think most Irish are known for that, right? I'm Irish, so of course I'm angry. I've heard Italians use that too. But I think Italians are just loud. But Dominicans have it over you. They're much louder. They have to amp it up. They get... Why do we do that? Because it becomes simply an excuse. It's not my fault. I was just trained this way. Well then, it's time to correct it. And don't pass it down to your children. Learn to deal with your anger issues. Don't put that on them. Now, if that kind of stuff goes on long enough, what happens is the child becomes despondent, maybe even severely depressed. They fear you. They don't even want to be around you. They can internalize it. It could churn. It could be churning in them as a resentment. It's just waiting for some time to express itself. But since they fear you at this point, they won't. But who knows at what point it will. Abuse. That's one way to cause anger in your children and to cause them to exasperate and cause them to lose heart. Another one is inconsistency. It's frustrating for the child. Okay? If the rules of the home keep changing according to your whim, then you're going to provoke your child to some form of anger. And you need to consider from the child's perspective. One day you write on the wall and it's cute. The next day you write on the wall and it's not cute. You're chasing for it. I don't understand. I thought you liked my drawings. One day mom says to do something 5 or 6 times and then she gets serious, so okay, now I'll obey. The next day she says it once, now I'm in trouble. What? Come on, Mom. What do you want? One meal, you play with your food, and Dad is laughing like crazy. The next day, you do the same thing, hoping for the same response, and Dad is mad and takes that out of the child. There's an inconsistency here. The child's confused. I don't know what's expected. And children, again, are going to gamble with inconsistency if it's going to be what they hope is in their favor. They'll get to do what they want. And that's one, again, of the reasons first-time obedience is important. Be consistent. It helps with that. They know what to expect, and so consistency in the parents is easier for both. Now, inconsistency causes frustration, which in turn leads to anger, and if it continues long enough, even the optimistic child can become pessimistic and quit trying. They're fearful that they're going to do the wrong thing no matter what they try and do. Somehow it's going to end up wrong. Well, I'm glad that the Lord's not that way. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's very consistent. I can trust him. His commands remain the same year after year, and I can always trust his promises. We should reflect God, shouldn't we? Be the same day in, day out. It's the same standard. Hold him to it. Don't keep switching it around. So inconsistency is another one. Third, parental selfishness. That's another provocation to anger. This is the opposite of the child-centered parent, which is a whole different problem. The degree of selfishness may vary, but for these parents, again, the child is an intrusion. And the result is they don't take the time to really know their children and what's on their hearts. It may be a little more common among dads, because dads tend not to spend as much time with the children because of work schedule and stuff. Mom usually has a little more time with the child. But it can occur with mothers too. The parent might even be physically present, but their mind is elsewhere, and only rarely do the children actually get the attention they should have. And that may be only to correct and keep them out of the way. It's a mindset of the parent toward the child. You're really not that important to me. And they figure it out. Now, a child with a selfish parent usually is not going to be angry with the parent, at least while they're small. They're going to be angry at whatever is taking the parent away from them. That's where the anger will be directed. That's blocking my goal. My goal is to be with my mom or my dad. As they get older, the anger is going to start shifting. They're going to recognize what the real problem is, and so there's going to be resentment or indifference, because there's no real practical demonstration that parents actually care about the child. The old pop song, you may have heard it, Cats in the Cradle, illustrates this because it goes through this whole song and basically comes to this. This son wants to spend time with him, and it just, all the years growing up. I don't have time, it's always going to be put off. The father retires and calls up his son and wants to spend time with his son, and the son doesn't have time for dad. And the last line of the song is, "My son was just like me." The relationship wasn't important. The son finally got it. All the opportunities didn't take advantage of it. And so it's, Dad, that'd be nice. Glad you want to talk. I'm busy, sorry. No relationship, lost it. Selfish indifference simply passed on to the next generation. So parental selfishness. Another one, favoritism. That's a danger for every family with multiple children, because every child is different, and because they're different, they need a different amount of attention. They have different needs. Add to that simple things like you may like the personality of one child more than the other. If you allow yourself to favor one over the other, or if you're not fair with them, you show favoritism, you're actually showing your own selfishness. And you're going to increase sibling rivalry and the resulting anger and resentment that comes from it. The anger and rivalry existed between Jacob and Esau in the scriptures, directly caused by parental favoritism. Rebekah favored Jacob, Isaac favored Esau. Jacob followed his parental example, and he became favorites. His favorite was Joseph, and was obnoxious about it. So much so that his brothers decided, let's get rid of this guy. Sold him into slavery. Where did that all start? Parental favoritism. that can lead to all sorts of problems. A fifth one, excessive expectations and discouragement. This is where you have to be assessing what the child is actually capable of doing. And I put these two together because they're associated with each other so closely. This is the parent that continually demands of the child more than they actually can do, and then castigates them, gets upset with them when they fail. The parent usually is ending up failing to make allowances that the child is a child, and there's childishness, and it takes time to gain skills. A lot of you have toddlers holding a cup and drinking from a cup. That's a challenge for those little ones. That's why we use sippy lids, right? So we don't spill everything all over the place. But they so much want to do it. Should you really be upset over spilled milk? Not if it's childishness. If it's foolishness, yes. Foolishness is if you told them, don't touch that, and they did anyways. That's foolishness, that's disobedience. But they're trying to drink it and they knock it over. I mean, come on. As adults, how many of you whack something as I went like, and then the glass goes flying and everything goes all over the place, like, and you do. He never got it. 5, okay? All right? Writing legibly, throwing, catching, all these things. They're skills that we learn, and we have to be patient. The same thing gets true as they get older. Riding a bike, driving a car, cooking, school lessons, household chores, repairs, all that kind of stuff. How many meals have you burned learning to cook? Should you be upset that your child doesn't understand how to put this together? Or which is the salt and which is the sugar? Wow, that was some pie. Yeah, I did that with I got to where I liked these key lime pies. And I misread the directions. So it's like 6 or 7 times the amount of lime in it. Man, you could pucker on it. I ate the whole thing. No one else did. They touched it, and that was it. One touch, and they were done. We need to understand there are things we're learning. And even as you're getting older, this is still true. The reality is that we're neither born with nor develop with equal ability. Every child's going to be different. Some are going to have great intellectual capacities, some are not. Some are going to have great physical abilities, some are not. Don't compare the siblings with each other. Don't compare them with other people. Encourage them instead with a proper expectation. They simply do their best, whatever that is. That's the proper expectation, not that they can do what other children. If your child's advanced, there's nothing wrong with complimenting on what they're doing, their achievements, but don't put them in a position where somehow you're making them superior to everybody else. It's not true. Proverbs 16:18 warns, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before stumbling. You're setting them up for a bad fall. You also want to make sure they're doing their best and don't fall into the trap of, I can get by. Because if they're not doing their best, that's a character issue. So we don't want excessive expectations and discouragements. At the same time, we want to make sure we're properly encouraging to their best. At the same time, what if your child can't do what other children do at the same age? Or they're not progressing the same rate as their older sibling? What do you do with that? You simply encourage them. You don't compare the two. You encourage them, well, what can you do? Are you doing your best? That's all you can ask of them. If you start comparing them, you're going to discourage them, and they're going to give up. We don't want to see that happen. I'll give a short one on that. David was taking guitar lessons. Jonathan had been taking for a couple of years. So Jonathan loves doing licks. So he's has pretty dexterity with his fingers as well. David doesn't. It's very difficult. He's never had great dexterity with his fingers. It's just a physical problem. And he was getting discouraged because John could play all these things and David couldn't do it. So he was about to really, I think, give up guitar. And I went and talked with him. And all I had to do was just point out, look, David, you don't expect, one, that you can do what your brother does. He's been doing it longer. Number 2, here's something you're doing he won't do. David could hardly strum, and he was willing to sing. Jonathan only wanted to play licks. He did not want to sing. I said, just work on that. Work on what you're good at. I'm really proud of you. Proud of me, Dad? Yeah, I'm proud of you, David. And from that, he decided he was just going to keep working at it. Because I also encouraged them, learn to play with your brother. He likes to do that, you learn to strum, and you can both play together. They started doing that a little bit, and then David just would spend hours really working. Well, those of you know him now, he plays how many different instruments? And he's good with them. Hard, hard work. I could have easily gone the other way if I discouraged him. Yeah, you're right, you're never going to play like your brother. Your fingers don't work that way, so why don't you just give up? Go do something else. That'd been a loss. So that's my point here. Excessive expectations, discouragement, don't do that. Be an encourager. Help them achieve the best that they can, whatever that is, okay? Train their character, that's what you're really after. Number 6, using affection to manipulate. This unfortunately has become more common because society says we shouldn't chase it. No physical correction. Then we find a lot more people going to emotional, mental efforts, which frankly are much more cruel. They're very cruel. These are children who must perform in order to receive love. They must meet whatever mom or dad's standard is for mom and dad to pay attention to them and show them any affection. Now certainly there's a strain in any relationship when there's disobedience, but we're already told how to handle that. We correct it, we teach them to ask for forgiveness, there's reconciliation, we go on with life. God does with that, we do that with our children. But when affection and love is withheld in order to manipulate, it confuses the child. They're never quite sure what will finally make them love me and care about me. It distorts their understanding of what love even really is. And so it brings frustration, discouragement. Why? Because no matter what they do, there's always going to be the next area that they're going to fail in. And so they will never get the love. Because they may have achieved it there, and all right, I got a high five, I got a hug, and immediately it's, oh, you're not doing this, so they withhold it again. It just continually pushes the child down. And they'll try for a while, and then it may be winning love's achieved on a short term, but long term, never can get it. It always gets removed, and so it becomes insecure. Always trying to then find love someplace. Someone will love me, my parents don't love me. How many people do you know that that seems to be the core of their being? They're just looking for someone to love them, because they never got it from their parents. There's always something that they had to do in order to earn it. We don't earn love, we're given love. We simply receive it. That's how God has treated us, isn't it? If we had to earn His love, we never could. He simply gives us love. That's how we treat our children. We love them. So parents have a great responsibility. Be careful, don't provoke your children to anger, don't exasperate them, causing them to lose heart. If that becomes a pattern in your parenting, you're going to damage your children. You're going to hinder them in ways that will affect them the rest of their lives. The reality is that you will do these things on occasion, at which point confess your own failures, confess them to God first. You may need to confess them to your spouse, have them work with you, and confess them to your child as well. There is something really special when you apologize to your child. Your children are so quick to forgive you. It's a precious time. You know, Daddy didn't do right here. I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me, son? Or daughter, you have a daughter. And well, yes, Daddy. And they want to give you the hug right away. That is teaching them something that really needs to be there. Gives them the right example. Now, there's a lot more scriptures that direct parenting about things to avoid in raising their children. And Proverbs has many, many statements about that. But I also want to get to the positive side, because there's also prescription. There's positive things here. In Ephesians 6:4 is to bring them up in the discipline and the nurture of the Lord. That's the positive side. These are things to avoid. What about things to do? Now, bring them up is the idea of caring for them. The word here, ektretheo, is primarily used of children. It means to nourish, to feed, to provide, to nurture, to rear. And as we're aware of, feeding is an ongoing action, isn't it? In fact, usually you're done with one meal, and what are you planning at the next meal? That's the same idea with parenting. You're done with one task, and what has to happen next? The next one, because it's an ongoing thing of training them. You get them to crawl, and then they're going to start toddling, and then they're going to start walking, and then they're going to start running, and then they're going to start riding a bike, and then they want to drive the car, right? You work so hard to get them to talk. Then later on, you're going to work really hard to get them not to talk, okay? Other skills, math, right? So addition, and then subtraction, and then multiplication, and then division, and then fractions, and proportions, and scientific note. You're going to get excited here. Scientific notation, and logarithms, and geometry, and algebra, and calculus, and the world is wonderful, right? Only if you love math. I think you're the only one in the room that loves math. You love math too? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we got a few math people. So you like the idea of algebra and calculus and all that. All right? Now, Paul speaks of two aspects of bringing up children, discipline and instruction. Discipline is the idea of training. The word here, paideia, specifically refers to various aspects of training a child. And so also translated as chastening, nurture, instruction, discipline, and training. There's a tendency to think of child training, especially discipline, from the negative side. Lots of prohibitions, you shouldn't do this. Most discipline should be very positive. It should be the encouragement. Yes, there's the negative. There's the things they shouldn't do and we'll correct them. And there's that part. But most of it actually is positive. It's observation. You're going to do lecture and reading and observation, discovery. You actually should be setting up opportunities for them to discover and learn for themselves, as well as opportunities to practice, reminders of lessons already learned and reinforcing those things. This kind of training is both formal and informal. It's the setting up when you have special times. We're learning math, we're learning this, but it's all the informal times as well. You're driving down the road, but doesn't Deuteronomy tell us that? It's when we sit, when we stand, when we're walking by the way, when we lie down, we sit. It's all of life. We're pointing things out to our kids and teaching them. That's this idea. Again, going back to Deuteronomy 6, the main thing that we're going to be teaching them about God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, all your soul and might. That's a great and foremost commandment. You're going to be doing that, as the rest of the passage says, in every situation of life. You're pointing out God's character qualities when you see something. How does God want you to respond to this situation? Someone cuts you off, and instead of saying, whatever, you know, we might say pin again because, you know, this person needs a person of grace and mercy. When I was teaching the kids, I was trying to teach them is always be judging. Someone's coming on, either speed up so they come behind you, or back off so they can get in front of you so the traffic flow is nice. Be courteous. You know, don't just over into the next lane. Look behind you. Put your blinker on. You know, be a courteous driver. Those are the same things, because how does God want us to respond? He wants me to be kind to people. That's all I just applied. When it comes to, okay, instead of throwing your trash down so everybody else can enjoy your trash, how about picking up their trash so no one else has to enjoy it? I'm being sarcastic there if you didn't get it. I don't want your trash. Let's be thoughtful of other people. These are things we're constantly teaching them. When we get to the whole section on responsibilities and being courteous to other people, we're going to give more of those kind of examples. But that's the idea of training. It's always ongoing. I'm always looking for these opportunities. Remember when Israel crossed the Jordan River, they picked up 12 stones. They put them across the river and stacked them. And we're told specifically why. So that the generations to come would come and go, what's this pile of stones, Dad? Let me tell you, son. And you have a lesson about God and what He's done in the past. You know what? We can trust God the same way today. He hasn't changed. We're facing some tough things, but He's there. Look at how He's blessed it. That's the idea of training. diligent to be doing this, transferring these ideas. Now instruction, the second aspect of bringing up a child, the word here, nuthasia, it's more stress on the mental aspects of teaching. The word root actually has to do with the mind. Instruction sets in the mind both the spiritual and societal truths of life and how to live with God and with man. Exemplified very much in the book of Proverbs. So much written in it. Proverbs 1, 2 through 6. Why was Proverbs given? Why do I advocate Proverbs so much for parents to teach their children? It's given to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understandings, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire wise counsel, to understand a proverb, a figure, the words of the wise, and his riddles. That is the idea of instruction. It has to do with the mental, then I apply that in life. These are the things I need to have. That's what wisdom resides in. Strong element of correction, this element. So sometimes this word can be used as admonition, warning, exhortation, as well as instruction. In this sense, it's instructive correction given without provoking or embittering the child. That's the whole idea, and that's the way we should be instructed. Provoking them properly to learn, not discouraging them. And then the final point I want to make here from Ephesians 6:4 is this instruction is of the Lord. Parental discipline instruction is of the Lord. The primary task of parents today is really the same as it was when Moses said the Decalogue. And it's the same thing. It's to be diligent to teach their children to love God, to know His commandments. Parents who fail to do that have failed regardless of how much time and money they spend on their children. Because ultimately, it's going to be before God that our children are going to stand. Too many dads think they're successful if they can purchase lots of stuff for their kids. Too many moms think they're successful if they give lots of time to their kids. However, if time and materials are not used to help your child to understand God, what He has done, how to love Him, then frankly all that stuff is wasted. Nurturing a child in the discipline and instruction of the Lord should encompass everything about 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. Which says the Word of God, what the Word of God is, it's God-breathed, it's His revelation, and what does it accomplish? It provides teaching, reproof, correction, and instruction in righteousness. Why? That the man of God may be adequate, thoroughly equipped for every good work. Teaching points out the path of life. That's the way to go. Reproof warns you've gotten off the path. Correction gets you back on the path, and instruction tells you how to stay on that path. That's what it does. It's a circle. Here's the path. Oops, you got off. I just got my reproof. Here's how to get back on it. Here's how to stay on it. That's the idea. Sort of like a clover leaf. That's what we do. We are teaching our children, and it's always going to be this. That's the way to go. You messed up. You're not on that path anymore. Here's how you're going to get back on it. Here's how to stay on it. Not an easy task, and it's an awesome responsibility. But there really is no responsibility or privilege you will ever have that is greater than raising your children. And no parent has it all together. You're going to fail here and there. That's why you need to be humble. You'll always be looking to the Lord to help you succeed, both by following His instructions and then relying upon His mercy and grace upon you and your children as you're trying to accomplish His will. So commit yourself to bringing up your children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Avoid the provoking to anger and exasperating them, causing them to lose heart. Because as you do that, your children will be a blessing to you and to others. And the real mark of a successful parent is they're a blessing to others. Okay, let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll finish up the last part about family, about goals, priorities,